Hello there, and welcome to my presentation, Protect Your Keys or Don't Waste Your Time Encrypting Your Data. My name is Brad Butlick. I'm the Vice President of Sales for the Western region and Latin America for Encipher. And this presentation you're about to watch, I've given a number of times from Philadelphia to San Diego and everywhere in between. And typically when I start this presentation, I ask some questions of the assembled audience. And every single time, the assembled audience has been security professionals. So I ask them a couple questions, and it's interesting the answers that I get. And I think as it pertains to encryption, I can encapsulate encryption with this little graphic that it's a little cartoon I have here, where then a miracle occurs. And some of us have probably seen this. I've been using it since the 90s, and it's very appropriate to today. But what I found out is that, you know, the majority of security professionals, they don't know the difference or can't explain the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption, two of the basic building blocks for encryption technologies, and they can't explain the differences. They also believe that the encryption, without question, is protecting their data, just the sheer act of encryption. And that's we're going to kind of put an end to that myth too. They also believe, this is the one I can't believe, is that the perimeter can be bolstered enough and secured enough to protect their data. I'm going to blow a hole through that one as well in this presentation. And the other thing is executive management. They would like to protect their data with encryption, but they're afraid to do so. And I think a lot of that has to come from the lack of knowledge is what's stopping a lot of these encryption projects. So I'm hoping this presentation kind of enlightens people about encryption a little bit more, and they'll take it a little more seriously, and they'll take protection of the key even more seriously. So one of the good ways to talk about encryption is to kind of go through a little bit of history. Believe it or not, encryption has been around for probably about 4,000 years. About 2000 BC, the Egyptians had started to use encryption. And at the time, it was what was called a simple substitution cipher. This, believe it or not, this is when symmetric encryption was born. This is symmetric encryption. We're using the technology or the concepts of the technology today, but this is symmetric encryption. And in this particular case, in a substitution cipher, they used a simple key. Now, I'm not going to go into what keys they use in Egyptian hieroglyphics because I don't understand hieroglyphics, but I do understand the English language. And to use a comparison, the key, a particular key might be move the alphabet 3 letters to the right. So in this particular case, if your message had an A in it, you replace it with an X. If it had a B, you replace it with a Y, et cetera, going down the path. And all of us have seen A Christmas Story, and we probably all remember the Ovaltine decoder ring, where Ralphie was told to turn the decoder ring to a particular number, and then they read off a bunch of numbers on the radio, and the message was, drink more Ovaltine, much to his chagrin. This is symmetric encryption. This is symmetric encryption used back in the 1940s. Substitution ciphers, what's interesting is the key that's used to encrypt the data is the same key that's used to decrypt the data. That's the same thing with symmetric encryption. The key used to encrypt the data is the same key used to decrypt the data. Within a substitution cipher, though, they're easy to crack. If you're a fan of Wheel of Fortune, you'll note that E is the most popular letter used in the English language, followed by T and A. So if you were to go through a encrypted message using a substitution cipher and replace the most prominent letter with E and the second most with T and A, you'd pretty much start figuring things out because there's not a lot of words in the English language that have like 2 letters. So once you figure out which one letter is there, you kind of replace it with the other one. The other thing that's interesting is you don't necessarily have to substitute letters with letters. Morse code is technically a substitution cipher, and therefore it is symmetric encryption. The only difference between this particular type of encryption and the encryption that we're using today is this has a key that's publicly known. This is kind of, you don't want to do this with encryption. You don't want to let your key publicly known, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about is how do you protect that key. But with the case of Morse code, everyone knows the key. So other early forms of encryption are very interesting to talk about. There's one thing called the Skytail cipher. This used a stick where the king would give the general a stick and say that their courier and messenger is going to arrive with a piece of leather that you're going to wrap around the stick, and a message will be displayed, attack at dawn or something like that. And in this particular case, what was the key? Some people might say, well, it's the stick was the key. Of course, not necessarily. It was the diameter of the stick that was the key. So how do you protect this key? This is the important thing. How do you protect a key like this? Well, the general kept it with him at all times. He'd probably sleep with it. He'd probably bathe with it. He'd walk around. He'd kind of whack somebody up against the head and point to a map or this or that. And that's where the swagger stick came from. Now, obviously, we stopped using skytail ciphers long before this picture was ever taken. But we kind of kept it as kind of a tradition of the way things used to be way back when. So as time passed, countries developed more complicated encryption solutions, one of which was done in World War II, which is the famous Enigma machine. The Nazis had, and it was kind of baffling the Allies as to, they wanted to know what the messages were. So whenever you come up with a more complicated encryption solution, you have to come up with a more complicated decryption solution. And Alan Turing developed the Turing bomb, which was a very sophisticated piece of machinery that some people might argue was one of the first computers. And what did the United States use during World War II? The United States actually used the Navajo language and alphabet. And if you've ever heard the expression of security by obscurity, this is definitely a security by obscurity. The Navajo language is pretty much only known to the Navajo Indians and a very small portion of the United States. So obviously the Japanese or the Germans didn't have access to the people that spoke this language. So what was the key in this particular case? Well, the key was a live, and I emphasize live, Navajo Indian. So the issue of the Navajo Indian who was the key, it's an unfortunate thing for them to have been, because the GIs were instructed that if they knew that a Navajo Indian was about to get captured by the enemy, they were supposed to kill them. And then if the Navajo Indian were to be captured by the enemy, he was told to kill himself. That's an important key, and I'd really hate to have been that key. But given enough time and effort, and maybe the possibility of capturing a Navajo Indian without dying, they would have cracked this code. So this whole presentation is about keys and how to protect the keys. But I need to kind of go into what a key really is. And here's a good example. The Rosetta Stone, believe it or not, is a key. Because prior to 1799, when this key was discovered, with Egyptian hieroglyphics on the top and Demontic in the middle and Greek at the bottom, no one knew what the Egyptian hieroglyphics said. So this key was able to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphics. To this day, no one knows what the Egyptian language sounds like, but at least now we can read it. And this key remained secret for 1,000 years. That's pretty amazing that the key was kept secret that long. So how important is the key? And here's another historical reference just to show how important the key is. And let's ask Mary Queen of Scots. Mary Queen of Scots didn't like Queen Elizabeth at all. As a matter of fact, she was plotting to kill Queen Elizabeth, so she hired a bunch of assassins, and she was communicating with the assassins using encrypted messages. Well, Queen Elizabeth knew that something was up, and so she put Mary Queen of Scots in prison, and then she went on her search to find the messages, the key. Eventually, Queen Elizabeth did find the key, and Mary Queen of Scots was executed. Now, that's an important key. That's a little graphic I put in here. It shows the death mask of Mary Queen of Scots, which is someplace in England in some museum. So fast forwarding to the 1970s, as computers were getting more powerful and affordable, IBM developed something called the data encryption standard. But the one problem that they had was they needed to be able to securely exchange the key between two different computers. Now, in the days of old, if you wanted to exchange a key, you kind of met somebody in a park, on a park bench, and you kind of slipped a piece of paper between the two of you, or maybe you made a phone call and you said, okay, the key is going to be, whatever it is. But with a computer, you didn't have that type of a luxury. So the two people that did come up with the solution were Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman. And many people know them as the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. And this was when symmetric key encryption key exchange was developed, around 1975. And AES, DES, and triple DES are the common encryption algorithms for symmetric encryption. Now, how do you send a key to someone you've never met? This kind of a story has been used a number of times. So let's meet Alice and Bob. So Alice needs to send a private key to Bob. So she puts her key into a box and she puts her lock on it. She then sends that key to Bob, and Bob takes the box and puts his lock on the box. He then sends the box back with both locks on it, and Alice removes her key from the box. She then sends the box back to Bob, and then Bob is able to take his lock off the box, and then he's able to get access to the key. It's a pretty simple way of doing this, and this is a way that nobody in the middle can open up the box. Now, unfortunately, Diffie-Hellman is not that simple. Diffie-Hellman uses some very complicated mathematical processes, one of which is called modular arithmetic. And in modular arithmetic, 9 plus 8 equals 5. Now, we all understand modular arithmetic. We just don't know it. This is what's called mod 12. So imagine you're at 9 o'clock in the morning and you know you've got a meeting 8 hours later. That meeting is at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's mod 12. So it's kind of interesting that there's technologies that are being used that we kind of understand, but in this case, it's a little more complicated, but it kind of gets the point. Symmetric encryption also uses something that's called a random number. Now, random numbers are not always random, which is kind of a weird concept, and we're going to get into it a little bit later. But you need to seed a value with a true random number that has been generated in such a way that checks its randomness. But just no matter how complicated the solution is, it really doesn't matter. What's most important is that you protect the key. The most important thing is that you protect the key. So from symmetric encryption to asymmetric encryption. Now remember, symmetric encryption, the key used to encrypt the data is the same key that's used to decrypt the data. Now the problem with this is it has one major weakness. With symmetric encryption, you need to have a formal relationship with the person at the other end. If you wanted to send a message, an encrypted message to somebody you didn't know, you couldn't do it. You'd have to, kind of notify them in advance. Asymmetric encryption fixes that problem. Some asymmetric encryption allows you to work with somebody you don't know, and it uses the concept of a public key and a private key. What is interesting here is that Whitfield Diffie, of the Diffie-Hellman fame, he postulated that there was this way of doing this public and private key scenario, but he couldn't figure it out. And unlike lots of mathematicians that would spend the rest of their life trying to figure it out, he knew this was important. He knew this had to be solved quickly. So he decided to send all of his work out to the world and said, please help me solve this problem. And that's where three doctors, Dr. Riveris, Dr. Shamir, and Dr. Edelman came in, and they actually were the ones that started the company RSA, and they were the ones that developed asymmetric key exchange around 1977. So asymmetric key exchange, like we said, is RSA, DSA, and ECC are common encryption algorithms in that space. These are called one-way ciphers. So unlike symmetric encryption, where the key used to encrypt is the same key used to decrypt, in asymmetric, the key that's used to encrypt the data is not the same key that's used to decrypt the data. And also the big thing with asymmetric encryption, allows you to work with people you don't know or entities that you don't know. And unfortunately, it requires a larger key size. So within the space of symmetric, you might have a 128-bit key. In order to have a key with the exact same amount of strength, the asymmetric key has to be 3072 bits. And because of this, asymmetric encryption is slower and requires more processing power than symmetric encryption does. So what's next? When I do this presentation, people say, well, what about, quantum encryption? And what about, quark encryption and photon encryption? And my favorite one people ask about all the time is, what about Dweezildack encryption? And it's like, okay, I made that one up. But that's just, the reason I made that up is it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what we come up with as far as computer technology or computer speed is concerned. What's only going to matter is that you have to protect the key. At this moment in time, probably one of the most powerful and most strongest key is an AES 256-bit key. And don't believe anybody that says they can brute force attack that key. The reason is there's so many combinations. There's 1.15 times 10 to the 77th combinations for that particular key. Now, if I was to write the number out, that's the number. That's a lot of commas, and that's a lot of digits. And if for any of those that are interested, that number would read as 115 quadrovigintillion. It took me a while to figure out how to say that, but it's 115 quadrovigintillion. That's how many combinations there are with an AES 256-bit key. And if I need a bigger key, I'll go to an AES 512-bit key. And that's probably a much bigger number. I haven't calculated that one yet. Right now, for the AES 256-bit key, with an incredible amount of processing power, it would still take millions of years to try every one of these combinations in an encryption lock of sorts to get access to the data. Millions of years. So we have nothing to worry about. It's an incredibly strong encryption key today. And the other thing is, don't believe anything Hollywood says in this. We've all seen the movies, and I could probably name a bunch of them, where there's the bad guy's got the gun to the head of the good guy and says, decrypt this message, you're going to be dead. And after feverish typing on the keyboard, he turns the computer around and voila, the message is decrypted. Can't happen. It really can't happen. The truth of the matter is, with modern encryption, no one in their right mind would try to break a key. Can't be broken. The only thing that the hackers can do, the thieves can do, is to steal the key. That's the only thing they can do. And as encryption technologies get better and computers get more powerful, the only thing that will matter is protecting the key. So how can you protect your key? This is the kind of the one part of my presentation where I kind of have a little bit about our company. Put your keys into a hardware security module, otherwise known as HSMs. These devices are specifically designed and certified to create and protect cryptographic keys, and preferably one made by Encipher, by the way. And I apologize for the short commercial here. And moving on. So if you have hardened security in a normal situation without an HSM, you've got keys that are scattered all throughout the application, the operating system hypervisors, even in their backups. So with an HSM, all your keys are extracted from all these different areas and put into a specific box that's designed to hold those keys and hold those keys secure so that the hackers can't access them. So, but why use an HSM? I mean, this is the one thing. We've talked about how important it is to keep the keys and how important encryption is, but why use an HSM in this particular case? The reason is quite simple. The average time between a hacker's penetration and detection is 160 days. If you look this up on the internet, you'll actually find two different numbers. The low end is 160, the high end is 260. But just for the sake of argument and to be a little more conservative on this, I'm putting down 160. That's still 5 months. I've got 5 months, and then the other thing is a software system cannot generate a true random number. This might be hard to believe, but a software can't generate a true random number. Hardware HSMs have a hardware random number generator, and these things test for randomness. We don't think about it very often, but when you remember the old days when you had an Apple iPod or an Apple Shuffle, and you put your music on there, and it would kind of you put it on shuffle and it would go through maybe 1,000 songs. There might have been a time where it would play the same song twice because that is random. But in the case of a computer system, that's not truly random. Randomness needs to be tested. And our hardware security modules and the hardware random number generator inside the system does test for that randomness. So more importantly, keys stored in software aren't hard to find. When I do this presentation live, I throw this slide up and I say, can somebody find the key in this data trace? And then it's like make the key a little bigger and say, can you find the key? And since I can't have somebody point to it at this point, I'll point to it for you. There it is. There's the key. Now, what does that key look like in comparison, or that piece of data look like in comparison to everything else? Note that it's lacking any pattern. It is random. And why is it random? Because it uses a random number generator to get to that space. And then so the other thing is, do you think it's going to take a hacker 160 days to find this? Probably not. So another thing to consider is, what do all these companies have in common? And there are lots of companies here. So I might spend just a little bit of time letting you peruse this for a bit. There's lots of companies, and they're actually listing the millions of records that have been stolen. The reason that I'm putting this up here is that every single one of these companies was involved in a data breach where a hacker bypassed their security perimeter measures. Now, this is not a dig on the companies that sell security perimeter, but it is a wake-up call to companies that spend 87% of their security budgets on perimeter security. It's like, why are they spending so much money on the perimeter security when it's failing repeatedly? If you go to ZDNet right now and you look up an article about the top security breaches of 2019, you'll find that they're listing about 74 security breaches in 2019. And I did the count. I went through that and found that 92% of the security breaches in 2019 were perimeter breaches. So why are they still relying on the perimeters? It just fascinates me that companies are still relying on the perimeters. And I think the main reason is it's in our DNA. We have been, for 5,000 years of recorded history, building walls to protect our assets. And those assets for those particular time have been physical. They've been treasure, they've been people, they've been munitions, they've been lots of different things. It's only really been for the last 70 years, and this is pushing it, that things that we've been needing to protect have been intangible. So in reality, only 1% of our recorded history has been sent in what I would call the digital age. So we need to really reprogram our DNA. We need to stop building walls and putting moats and putting barbed wire and glass embedded in concrete on top of those walls. We need to do something different, and that different is protecting the data. Now, unfortunately, this is going to take some years, and more people are going to have to listen to this presentation and start understanding that we cannot protect our data by building bigger and better walls. So let me put this another way. You know, if a burglar were to come into your house or try to break into your house, is he going to break the window to get into your house? Probably not. If your house is anything like mine, I've got a window that's within 3 feet of my front door, and it'd be very easy for them just to break the window and get in. But the first thing they're going to do, I guarantee it, is they're going to check and see if the door is locked. Sometimes people don't lock their doors. That's a problem. But after they find that it is locked, they're going to check to see where the key is. So it's like, oh no, the door is locked. What shall I do? I'm a smart burglar. I'm going to look under the mat. I'm going to look under the flower pot. I'm going to try and find that key that's in that rock that looks like you bought it from Sharper Image. If you get anything out of this presentation, please remember this, that without an HSM, it's like putting your encryption key under the mat, hiding it in software. And don't forget that the hacker has 160 days to find this key that's hidden under the mat, under the flower pot, under the rock that's in the rock garden. So once they're in, they can easily access your data because the keys are easy to find under the mat. And then they get access to all that data and they can expose it. Now remember also that hackers is not necessarily singular. It's often plural. So let's say that you've got a group of hackers. You've got one person whose job is to penetrate a network, followed up by a bunch of other people whose job it is to farm whatever they can get out of the network. So let's say I've got a hacker that are in there, and I've got 5 hackers. That's 3+ man years of time that they're inside your network. I've got 10 hackers. That's 6.5 man years of time that they're in your network. And let's say it's a nation state. I've got 50 hackers. That's 32 man years inside your network. And this also assumes that they're working union time rules, which they probably aren't. And once they get in, they've got your information and your reputation. That's the bad part about this. So what solutions use encryption technologies? We've talked a lot about data encryption in this because it's probably one of the easiest to explain in this particular context. But there's a lot of other places that use encryption technology. You've got file encryption. You've got digital signatures and certificates. Lots of people in lots of countries are now starting to use digital certificates and signatures within their space. And it's very important that those digital signatures and certificates are generated with the appropriate hardware security module with that true random number generator. You also have IoT devices. There's lots of IoT devices, and all those IoT devices have to have a digital certificate put on them so that you can make sure that hackers can access that IoT device and insert fraudulent software into that device. The biggest IoT device that I'm currently concerned about are these self-driving cars. And they're making sure that they are securing those systems so that someone else cannot take control. Blockchain is another one. I mean, blockchain, everyone's talking about, Bitcoin and blockchain and that type of technology. This, again, is a cryptographic solution that requires a key of some type. You also have digital payments. are out there, and no one is going to submit their credit card onto the internet or at a consumer the store to buy something without the guarantee that their digital information is being protected. You also have SSL. People are using SSL often, and they have proven that SSL can be hacked. And this again uses a key in order to protect it. And of course, you've got things like PKI. When you implement a Microsoft or an Entrust PKI, you need to have an HSM that's protecting the back end for that solution. So every one of these technologies uses a key. So let's put some names to these technologies. I'm going to put this slide up for a little bit so that you can read it a little bit more. But we have, everything from Oracle to Microsoft to Prime Key to all the ones that are on this thing, F5 and Citrix. They all have solutions that require a key. And I'm sure a lot of you have these applications in your organization, and you really do want to get those keys out of this software and into hardware. So let's review. Symmetric encryption, the same key is used to encrypt as is used to decrypt the data. Works only if you know the parties or systems. Getting both parties to agree on a key has always been the weakest link. And so this is the strongest encryption once the key has been safely exchanged. And it is faster than asymmetric encryption. And then we have asymmetric encryption. Asymmetric encryption, the key used to encrypt the data is not the same key used to decrypt the data. It works well if you don't know the other person or party. And it uses a stronger key length than symmetric encryption to maintain the same security footing. And it is slower than asymmetric and then symmetric encryption. There have been books written about this topics and the comparisons between the two. And this, for the most part, is all you need to know about this between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. So in conclusion, corporate perimeters are far too complicated and cannot be secured. There was a story that was going around last year about a casino that had a fish tank into which somebody put a wireless digital thermometer so they could measure the temperature of the fish tank without getting up from their desk. This wireless digital thermometer had a massive security hole that was exploited by some hackers, and they were able to access the network and get access to the high roller data that was in the database at the casino. Now, do you think the person that put the thermometer in the fish tank knew that they were going to be opening up a security breach? Do you think they thought about asking the person in the IT department if they should do it? They might have asked the IT department, and the IT department might have said, oh, go ahead and do it. There's no big risk. So corporate networks are far too complicated. It's so easy for just one little itty-bitty breach, one little itty-bitty crack in your perimeter is enough that a hacker needs to get into your systems. So you're better off focusing on securing the data and verifying the authentication of the data inside your organization. We need to stop relying on the walls. We absolutely need to stop relying on the walls. And in order to do that, we need to reprogram our DNA. And the other thing is we need to realize that modern encryption solutions cannot be decrypted through hacking techniques. We need to stop believing what Hollywood says on this point. They are absolutely not right on that. And a hacker's only option that they have is to find or to steal the key. So we need to do something to really make sure that those keys are protected. And don't leave your keys under your mat at home or at work, and protect the keys at all costs. And if you don't protect the keys at all costs, you might be like Mary Queen of Scots and have your head chopped off. And don't let this happen to you. And now just a little bit of a word for the sponsor of this event. The sponsor of this particular presentation is Encipher, the company that I have worked for the last 14 years. It has been a great run. I've loved working for this company. We have this particular HSM that we're talking about. We're probably, I think, on our 4th or 5th different version of it over time. We've continued to improve the technology. We've been doing this for the last 20 plus years. These particular devices are in many of the companies who you trust, and a lot of the trust that you get from these companies comes from the HSM that we've installed in their networks. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed this presentation and you now understand much more about encryption technologies and how important it is to protect the key. I can't stress this anymore. If you're going to go through the effort of encrypting your data in your organization, which I highly recommend because the perimeter is going to fail you, please go that one extra step and make sure that the key that you're using, whether it's encryption, blockchain, application encryption, anything like that, you want to make sure that all of that is protected at the highest level possible. So if you want, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and hopefully I can hear from some of you soon. Thank you very much.